The council chamber stood empty, where Ambassador Taman used to sit. His chair remained exactly as he had left it 3 months ago, pushed back slightly, as if he had just stood up to leave. Counselor Vess walked past it every day, and every day he felt a strange sensation in his chest that his species called regret. Taman has been the human representative for 12 years. He was a quiet man who spoke carefully and listened more than he talked. When he did speak, other counselors often dismissed his words. Humans were too new to the galactic community, they said. Humans didn't understand how things worked, they claimed. Humans needed to learn their place. The last message from Earth came on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Taman had sent it himself, standing in the empty human embassy with his bags already packed. The message contained only 7 words that would echo through history. "We are done here. Goodbye forever." Within 3 days, every human in the galaxy had vanished. The colonies on 14 worlds were abandoned but not destroyed. Every building, every machine, every piece of technology was gone. The humans had taken everything with them or erased it so completely that nothing remained. Not even garbage. Not even a fingerprint. The transition gates that connected 40 star systems went dark. These massive structures had allowed ships to travel between distant worlds in hours instead of years. Humans had built them, humans had maintained them, and humans had generously allowed all species to use them freely. Now they were just dead metal floating in space. Counselor Vess remembered arguing against human control of the gates. He had given speeches about how dangerous it was to let one species control galactic transportation. He had demanded that humans share the technology so other species could build their own gates. Taman had explained over and over that the technology was incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. He had offered to train engineers from other species, but only if they agreed to strict safety protocols. The council had refused. They called it human arrogance. They accused humans of hoarding knowledge. They passed resolution after resolution demanding immediate technology transfer. Taman had voted against every single one. It's always outvoted 16-1. Now, Vess stood in front of the dead transition gate in the Kelro system and understood. Without the humans, no one knew how to operate these things. 3 science teams from the most advanced species had tried to reactivate just one gate. The best they could do was make it hum slightly before it went silent again. The first pirate attack started in week 4. The human defense fleet had patrolled the trade routes between Council space and the wild regions beyond. Captain J1 had commanded those ships with a crew that never numbered more than 10,000 humans across the entire galaxy. Such a small force should not have been able to keep the peace across hundreds of star systems. But they had. For 20 years, they had. Merchant ships reported attacks daily now. The pirates were not sophisticated. They were not well armed. But there were so many of them, and there was no one to stop them anymore. The Council's own species had ships and weapons, of course, but they were designed for different purposes. Human ships had been built specifically for rapid response and protection. Human captains had trained for these exact scenarios. The Council tried to create their own defense force. They pulled together ships from 7 different species and sent them to patrol the most critical trade route. The fleet lasted 11 days before a coordinated pirate attack destroyed half the ships and sent the rest running. Captain J1 would have handled that situation before breakfast. Trade began to collapse. Ships stopped traveling without protection. Goods that had flowed freely between worlds for 2 decades suddenly became scarce. Prices increased. Shortages appeared. On some worlds, people started going hungry. Counselor Vez called emergency sessions. He proposed solutions. He formed committees. But every solution seemed to require something the humans used to provide. Security, transportation, technology, knowledge. The humans had been involved in everything, and no one had noticed because they made it look easy. Dr. Hannah had been the head of the Galactic Medical Institute. She was a small woman with gentle hands who had trained over 600 alien doctors in techniques she developed herself. Her specialty was cross-species medicine, finding ways to treat diseases that jumped between different biological systems. She had published hundreds of research papers. all freely available to anyone who wanted to read them, but her most important work had never been published. She kept it in encrypted files, backed up on human servers that no longer existed. When the Velkin plague appeared in month 7, spreading from the Velkin people to 3 other species that shared their star system, the doctors, trained by Dr. Hannah, tried everything they knew. It was not enough. Hannah had always said that the real skill was not in the techniques, but in the thinking behind them. She had tried to teach that thinking, but it took years to develop. The plague killed 40 million people before it burned itself out. Dr. Hannah would have stopped it in days. Counselor Vess attended the memorial service for the plague victims. He stood in the back and listened to the speeches about tragedy and loss. No one mentioned that this tragedy could have been prevented. No one said out loud that they had driven away the one person who could have saved those 40 million lives. On the border with the Vradix Empire, the situation grew worse. The Vradix were not evil exactly. They were simply expansionist. They believed that strong species should control territory and weak species should submit. For 30 years, they had tested the Council's borders, probing for weakness. For 30 years, Captain J1 and the human fleet had been there to push them back. Not with violence, usually. J1 preferred diplomacy backed by the visible presence of ships that could fight if needed. The Vradix respected strength. They respected the humans who had never lost a battle against them. Now, the humans were gone. The Vradix sent scouts across the border. No one stopped them. They sent colony ships. No one stopped them either. Within 2 months, they had claimed 3 star systems. The Council sent angry messages demanding withdrawal. The Vradix ignored them. Vess looked at the reports coming in from across the galaxy and finally understood what Taman had been trying to tell them for 12 years. Humans had not been controlling the Council. They had been holding it together. They had been the glue, the foundation, the quiet strength that made everything else possible. And the Council had treated them like annoying children who needed to be controlled and limited and kept in their place. In his office late at night, Vess accessed the archive of Council sessions. He watched recordings of Taman presenting proposals, plans for better security coordination, suggestions for medical research sharing, ideas for fair trade agreements. Every single one had been voted down or ignored in one recording from 8 years ago. Taman stood at his podium and said something that Vess had laughed at the time. We do not ask for special treatment. We ask only for partnership based on respect. Without respect, there is no partnership. There is only exploitation. And exploitation always ends badly for everyone involved. Vess had called that statement human arrogance. He had accused Taman of threatening the Council. The vote to censure Taman had passed 14-3. Now, sitting alone in his dark office, Counselor Vess finally heard what Taman had actually been saying. It was not a threat. It was a warning. A warning they had all ignored until it was far too late. The power went out on Station Kelrose 9 at exactly 3 in the morning. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the corridors in red. Station Chief Merv expected the main power to return within minutes, as it always did. The backup systems were supposed to handle any interruptions seamlessly. Power did not come back engineer. Su-Young had designed the power distribution network for Kelrose 9 and 32 other stations across the galaxy. She had been a cheerful woman who hummed while she worked and always had time to explain things to curious apprentices. She had trained 40 alien engineers, walking them through every system, every backup, every failsafe. But some knowledge cannot be fully transferred through training. Su-Young had an intuitive understanding of how energy flowed through complex systems. She could look at a power grid and see problems before they happened. She could make adjustments that seemed simple but were actually brilliant. Her apprentices had the technical knowledge. They did not have her gift. The engineering team on Kelrose 9 tried everything they knew. They checked every connection, tested every relay, examined every power conduit. The system should have worked. According to every diagnostic they ran, it was working. But the power still did not flow correctly. On day 3, they made a decision that Su-Young would have forbidden. They bypassed one of her unnecessary safety systems to try to force the power back online. The resulting surge destroyed half the station's infrastructure and killed 16 people. Station. Kel Rosenine was evacuated 2 weeks later. It joined 7 other stations that had gone dark in the past 6 months. Millions of people were displaced, searching for new homes on already crowded worlds. Counselor. Vess visited one of the refugee camps on Tralis Prime. Families from 6 different species lived in temporary shelters, waiting for housing that might never come. Children played. An elderly Kelvin woman approached Vess as he toured the camp. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "My daughter died on Kelrose 9, she said. She was one of the engineers who tried to fix the power. She told me they did not know what they were doing. She said Su Young would have fixed it in an hour, but Su Young was gone, and they were just guessing." Vess had no answer for her. He pulled his arm free gently and walked away, feeling the weight of her stare on his back. The Verdix Empire continued its expansion. 7 systems had fallen now, with a total population of 12 billion people. Most had fled before the Vradix arrived, but some had stayed, hoping for protection that never came. The Council sent strongly worded diplomatic protests. The Vradix sent back polite responses that meant nothing. Ambassador. Kira was a young Luminian who had worked as Tame's assistant for 3 years. She was one of the few aliens who had actually become friends with humans rather than just working alongside them. Taman had taught her to speak Korean, and they had often conversed in that language during quiet moments in the embassy. She remembered the day Taman told her he was leaving. They sat in his office, drinking tea that Taman had prepared himself. "We tried," he said quietly in Korean. "We gave them everything we could. It was not enough." "They do not appreciate what you do," Kira had replied, also in Korean. "But some of us understand." Taman smiled sadly. "Some is not enough. A partnership where only some value their partners is not a partnership. It is charity. And we are tired of being charitable to people who resent us for it." Kira had cried when Taman left. She was the last alien to see him before Earth went silent. He had hugged her, which was unusual for him, and whispered, "Take care of yourself, Kira. The hard times are coming. Be strong." Now, those hard times were here. Kira worked in the archives, trying to preserve what little knowledge humans had left behind. Most of it was basic information, the kind of things they had shared freely. The advanced knowledge, the real secrets, had vanished with them. She spent her evenings studying human culture and history. She read their books, watched their entertainment, listened to their music. She was searching for something, though she was not sure what. An answer, maybe. A clue to where they had gone or why they had really left. The human colony world of New Sol had been home to 8 million people. It was completely empty now, the buildings dismantled so thoroughly that only foundations remained. Kira requested permission to visit, and surprisingly, the council approved. Perhaps they thought she would find something useful. She walked through the empty streets, where families had lived and children had played. The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed reluctant to disturb this place. Humans had lived here for 40 years, building a society that worked peacefully, despite coming from dozens of different Earth nations and cultures. In the center of the old capital city, Kira found a park. The trees were dying now without human care, but she could see what it must have been like. Benches arranged around a fountain, playgrounds where children had laughed, walking paths where people had exercised and talked and enjoyed being alive. She sat on one of the benches and wept. Not just for the humans, but for everyone. For the galaxy that could have been, if only they had been wiser. Her exploration team found the cavern 3 days later. It was deep beneath the city, accessible only through a hidden entrance that someone had meant to be found eventually. The message carved into the bedrock was in Old Korean, the classical form of the language that Taman had taught her to read. The message was from someone named Hyan Wu. Kira read it slowly, her translation device recording every word. When she finished, she sat in the darkness of the cavern and cried again. The message was not angry. That somehow made it worse. It was sad and disappointed and final. It explained why the humans had left in words that were simple and clear. They had come seeking partnership and found only suspicion. They had given freely and received restrictions in return. They had protected those who called them dangerous. They had healed those who called them arrogant, and they were done. The message ended with words that Kira would remember forever. Do not search for us. You will not find us. But know, the galaxy you inherit is the one you built. May you find the wisdom to preserve it. Kira transmitted the message to the council. She expected denial or anger or excuses. Instead, there was silence. For 3 days. The council chamber stood empty as the members absorbed what the message meant. When they finally reconvened, Counselor Vess stood at his podium and did something unprecedented. He apologized, not to the humans, who were gone and beyond hearing, but to the people of the galaxy who were now suffering because of the council's failures. We were given a gift, Vess said, his voice rough with emotion. A species came to us, offering partnership, protection, knowledge, and friendship. And we threw it away because we were too proud to accept help, too suspicious to trust, too foolish to recognize wisdom when it spoke to us. Some counselors tried to argue. They wanted to blame the humans for being too sensitive, too demanding, too quick to abandon their responsibilities. But their words sounded hollow even to themselves. The evidence was everywhere. The dark stations. The refugee camps. The expanding Vradix Empire. The plague graves. The paralyzed trade routes. Everything that was going wrong now had been prevented by humans for 20 years. And the council had never even said thank you. Ambassador Kira returned to her archives and began a new project. She started collecting every positive story about humans that she could find. The merchant who told how Captain J1 had saved his ship from pirates. The mother whose child had been cured by Dr. Hannah when every other doctor had given up hope. The engineer who described how Su Young had patiently taught him to understand power systems. Thousands of stories. Tens of thousands. Humans had touched millions of lives across the galaxy, almost always for the better. And those millions had simply accepted it as normal, never thinking about what would happen if the humans left. Now they knew. Now everyone knew, and the knowledge came far too late to matter. 2 years had passed since the humans disappeared, and the galaxy was falling apart. Counselor Vess stood before the assembly and made a proposal that would have been unthinkable before. He wanted to send a mission to find humanity and beg them to return. Half the council laughed. The other half looked at him with pity. They made it clear they want nothing to do with us, one counselor said. We should respect their wishes and focus on solving our own problems. What problems? Vess asked quietly. The Vradix have taken 9 systems now. 12 stations are dead and empty. Pirate attacks have increased 400%. We have 3 active plague outbreaks and no one capable of stopping them. Trade has collapsed to levels not seen in a century. Which of these problems should we solve first, and how do you propose we solve them without the people who were solving them before? The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Kira stood up. I volunteer to lead the search mission, she said. Taemin was my friend. If anyone can find them, or at least understand where they went, it should be me. The council approved the mission by a narrow vote. Many still believed it was a waste of resources. They would rather spend the money on warships to fight the Vradix, or scientists to reactivate the transition gates. Kira did not argue with them. She simply prepared her ship and her crew and left. The search team included scientists from 7 species. They were some of the best minds in the galaxy, experts in tracking, archaeology, sensor technology, and xenology. If humanity had left any trace, these people should be able to find it. They found nothing. Every human world was the same. Buildings dismantled down to the molecular level. Data cores wiped so thoroughly that even quantum archaeology revealed nothing. It was as if humans had never existed at all. The only evidence they left behind was their absence, the gaps in the galaxy where they used to be. On the 4th world they searched. A scientist named Drell made a discovery. He found microscopic traces of a substance that should not exist naturally. After 3 days of analysis, he determined it was a residue from some kind of matter disassembly technology. Humans had not just packed up and left. They had erased every trace of their presence using technology so advanced that no other species had even theorized it was possible. Why? Kira asked, staring at the analysis results. Why go to such lengths? They could have just left. Drell considered the question carefully. Perhaps they did not want us to follow. Or perhaps they did not want us to have their technology, even by accident. Or perhaps... He paused. Perhaps they wanted to make a point, to show us exactly how much we had lost. Kira thought about that for a long time. It sounded like something Taman would do. He had been a gentleman, but he had also been proud. Not arrogant, but unwilling to be disrespected. If humanity had decided to leave, they would do it completely and thoroughly. Leaving no doubt about their decision, the search continued for 8 months. They visited 14 human colonies, 23 outposts, and 47 research stations. All empty. All erased. The only living things they found were plants and animals that humans had left behind, Earth species that were now wild on alien worlds. A young new soul. Kira led the team personally. This was the largest human colony outside of Earth itself. If they were going to find anything, it would be here. They searched for 2 weeks using every sensor, every technique, every trick they knew. It was Kira who found the cavern. She was not looking for it specifically. She had simply wanted to walk through the old city center alone. To remember the time she had visited this place with Taman. He had brought her here once, showing her the park where he liked to walk and think. The entrance to the cavern was hidden beneath what had been a memorial to the first colonists. Kira only found it because she remembered Taman talking about underground shelters built in the early years. She searched until she found the access tunnel sealed but not destroyed. The message on the cavern wall was in Old Korean. Kira's translation device could handle the words. But she read it in the original language first, the way Taman had taught her. Her hands shook as she traced the carved letters with her fingers. Hyeon-woo had written about coming to the stars with hope, about seeking partnership among equals, about the disappointment of finding suspicion instead of welcome, restrictions instead of respect. The message was not bitter exactly. It was sad, profoundly, deeply sad. Gave everything we could, the message said. We asked only to be treated as partners, not children, to be managed or threats to be contained. When that proved impossible, we made the only choice we could. We chose ourselves. We chose dignity over acceptance. We chose pride over inclusion. If you are reading this, know that we do not hate you. We are simply tired. Tired of being unappreciated. Tired of being feared while we protect. Tired of being resented while we help. We return to ourselves. Perhaps in the future, if your people grow wiser, our descendants might meet again. But that will be for them to decide, not us. For now, we are done. Kira transmitted the message to the council. She also sent her own report. The humans are not hiding nearby, she wrote. They are not in this galaxy at all. The technology they use to disappear suggests capabilities far beyond what they ever showed us. They could be anywhere. Another galaxy. Another dimension. We will not find them unless they want to be found. She included a personal note for Counselor Vess. They left this message for a reason. They wanted us to know why. They wanted us to understand. Not to punish us, but to teach us. Everything they ever did was about teaching, if only we had been willing to learn. The council received the transmission in silence. Some members wanted to continue the search. Surely humanity could not have gone far. Surely with enough effort, they could be found and convinced to return. But Kira knew better. She had known Taman. She had studied human history and culture. When humans made a decision like this, they committed to it completely. They would not be found because they did not want to be found. And even if they were found, they would not return because the galaxy had not changed. The search mission returned to Council space after 11 months. They had spent enormous resources and found one message carved in stone. Many counselors called it a failure. Kira did not argue with them. She had learned long ago that some people would never understand, but she kept a copy of the message in her personal quarters. She read it often, especially on difficult days, when the problem seemed overwhelming. It reminded her of what they had lost and why they had lost it. It reminded her that pride and suspicion always came with a cost. In the end, Hyeon-woo had been right. The galaxy they inherited was the one they had built. A galaxy without humans was what they had chosen through their actions, if not their words. Now they would have to learn to survive in it if they could. 5 years after the humans left, Counselor Vess looked like a different person. His scales had dulled from stress. His movements were slower, more careful. He had aged a decade in 5 years, and everyone who knew him could see it. The council chamber was half empty these days. 3 species had withdrawn from the alliance entirely, choosing to protect their own interests rather than contribute to a collective that seemed doomed to fail. For others attended sessions only occasionally, sending minor representatives instead of their actual counselors. The Vradix Empire now controlled almost a third of what used to be council space. 15 systems, with a combined population of 30 billion people, most had surrendered without a fight. What was the point of fighting when there was no hope of winning? Captain J1 would have found a way. He always had. But J1 was gone, and the military minds that remained were not like him. They could plan battles, but they could not prevent wars. They could command ships, but they could not inspire loyalty across species boundaries. They could fight, but they could not win. The Kelvin Plague had finally ended after killing 90 million people across 4 species. It had burned itself out naturally, leaving behind empty cities and mass graves. Dr. Hannah could have stopped it in the early stages. Her students had tried, but they were not her. They had her techniques, but not her insight, her knowledge, but not her wisdom. 3 more plagues had appeared since then. 2 were contained through brutal quarantines that destroyed the economies of the affected worlds. The 3rd was still spreading, and no one knew how to stop it. Station failures continued. 23 stations had been evacuated now. Hundreds of millions of people displaced, searching for homes that did not exist. Engineer Su Young had built networks that seemed simple but were actually works of genius. Without her, those networks were failing one by one, and no one could fix them fast enough. Ambassador Kira had become something like a counselor herself, though she held no official position. People listened to her because she had known the humans. She had been there. She had tried to warn the council before it was too late. Young politicians from several species looked to her for guidance. She spent her days in the archives that she had built, surrounded by human artifacts and records. She had collected everything she could find: photos, videos, personal items left behind, stories from people who had known humans. It was a museum and a memorial and a warning all at once. One day, a young Tralian student came to visit. His name was Keth, and he was studying political philosophy. "Is it true that Ambassador Taman warned the council this would happen?" he asked. Kira pulled up old recordings. "Watch," she said. They spent hours reviewing council sessions from years past. Taman stood at his podium again and again, presenting proposals and ideas. Better coordination between species, shared training programs, mutual respect agreements, fair representation based on contribution rather than just species membership. Every proposal was voted down or ignored. In some sessions, other counselors did not even pretend to listen. They talked among themselves while Taman spoke. They checked their data tablets. They made jokes that Taman could obviously hear. Keth watched with growing horror. They treated him like he was nothing, the young student said. Like his words did not matter. They treated all humans that way, Kira replied. The humans built the transition gates and asked only to help maintain them. The council demanded full technology transfer and called them arrogant when they refused. The humans provided free security for trade routes and asked only for a voice in trade policy. The council ignored them and called them controlling. The humans did everything right, and the council found reasons to resent them for it. She showed Keth more recordings. Dr. Hannah presenting medical research freely to anyone who wanted it. Engineer Su Young training alien apprentices with patience and kindness. Captain Jawan mediating disputes between species who would have gone to war without him. Hundreds of humans working quietly to make the galaxy better, asking nothing in return except basic respect. Why did they help us if we treated them so badly? Keth asked. Kira smiled sadly. Because that is what humans did. They believed in the idea of a galactic community, even when the community did not believe in them. They hoped that eventually we would learn to appreciate them. They were wrong. Keth began visiting the archives regularly. He brought friends. The friends brought others. Soon, Kira was giving regular presentations about human history and culture to young people from a dozen species. They asked questions that older generations never thought to ask. They saw things that their parents had been too proud or too suspicious to see. Counselor Vess attended one of these presentations unannounced. He sat in the back and listened as Kira explained the human concept of reciprocity. Humans believe that relationships required mutual respect, she said. If one side gives and gives while the other only takes, that is not a relationship. That is exploitation. And humans had been exploited enough in their own history. They came to the stars determined never to be exploited again. After the presentation, Vess approached Kira. I was wrong, he said simply. About everything. I spent years arguing that humans were dangerous, that they wanted too much power, that they needed to be limited and controlled. I was completely wrong. I know, Kira said. Not meanly just stating a fact. Can we fix this? Vess asked. Can we bring them back? Kira shook her head. No, they are gone. They made that choice, and they will not reverse it. But we can learn from our mistakes. We can build something better. Together, Vess and Kira began drafting what they called the Taman Accords. HFY. A complete restructuring of galactic governance based on principles the humans had tried to teach. Equal representation. Mutual respect. Fair distribution of both benefits and responsibilities. No species would be expected to contribute more than others without having appropriate voice in decisions. It was everything Taman had proposed over 12 years, always rejected, now finally being considered. But the humans who had inspired it would never see it. The Taman Accords were debated for 8 months. Many counselors opposed them. Why should we completely change our system? They argued. These problems are temporary. We will find solutions. Kira stood before the council and spoke words she had been saving for years. The humans gave us 20 years of peace and prosperity. They asked for respect and partnership. We gave them suspicion and restrictions. They left, and within 5 years, everything they built has fallen apart. We are watching the galaxy burn, and some of you still do not understand why the fire started. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Taman Accords are not about bringing humans back. They are about becoming worthy of them. About building a galaxy that deserves a second chance. Whether humans ever return or not, we should be better than we were. We owe them that much. The Accords passed by a narrow vote. Implementation began immediately. It was too late to save the systems already lost to the Vratics. Too late for the millions who had died in plagues and station failures. Too late for the trade networks that had collapsed and the trust that had been broken. But it was a start. A small, fragile start toward being better. Counselor Vess retired 6 months later. His replacement was Keth, the young student who had learned about humans in Kira's archives. On his first day as counselor, Keth visited Taman's old chair. Someone had placed a small plaque on it that read, "They tried to warn us. We did not listen." Keth touched the plaque gently and made a silent promise. He would listen. He would learn. And he would make sure the next generation understood what their parents had lost and why. 10 years had passed since the day Earth went silent. Ambassador Kira stood in what used to be the human embassy, now preserved as a historical site. Young people came here every day to learn about the species that had changed the galaxy and then left it behind. The galaxy had changed, but not in the ways anyone had hoped. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Only 9 species remained as active members. The others had either withdrawn to protect themselves or been conquered by the Vratics Empire, which now controlled nearly half of known space. Billions had died in wars that Captain J1 would have prevented. More billions had died in plagues that Dr. Hannah would have cured. Hundreds of stations floated dead in space, monuments to Engineer Su Young's irreplaceable genius. The transition gates remained dark, cutting travel times between stars from hours back to years. But something else had emerged from the ruins. Something that would have made Timon proud if he could have seen it. The younger generation had learned They studied human philosophy and history like sacred texts. They memorized Taemin's speeches and debated their meaning. They asked questions that made their elders uncomfortable. Why had they treated humans so badly? What had they been afraid of? How could they have been so blind? Counselor Keth had been in office for 4 years now. He was the youngest counselor in galactic history, elected because people believed he represented change. He took the responsibility seriously, perhaps too seriously. He worked every day until exhaustion, trying to solve problems that had no easy solutions. Today he sat in his office reviewing proposals. The Taemin Accords were in full effect now, but implementation was slow and difficult. Changing centuries of ingrained habits and prejudices was not something that happened overnight. Kira entered without knocking. She was one of the few people who could do that. "You need to sleep," she said. "You are no good to anyone if you collapse." "There is too much to do," Keth replied, not looking up from his tablet. The Kelros sector reported another plague outbreak. The Defense Committee still cannot agree on a response to the latest Radix expansion. 3 more species are threatening to withdraw from the Council unless we can guarantee their security, which we cannot do without resources we do not have. Kira sat down across from him. "Do you know what Taemin told me once? He said that you cannot solve every problem. You can only do your best, and accept that some things will fail despite your efforts. The important thing is to keep trying, even when failure seems certain." Easy for him to say, Keth muttered. He could actually solve problems. "I just shuffle them around and hope something works." "He also failed sometimes," Kira said gently. "He tried for 12 years to make the Council listen. He failed, but he kept trying until the day he gave up and left. That is what you must do. Keep trying." Keth finally looked at her. "Do you think they are watching? The humans? Do they see what we have become?" Kira had wondered the same thing many times. "I do not know. Perhaps if they are, I hope they see that some of us are trying. That their lessons were not completely wasted." She stood and walked to the window. Beyond it, the city stretched out under an alien sky. "I go to Nusol tomorrow," she said. "My 17th visit to the cavern. Would you like to come?" Keth nodded. "Yes, I should see it. I have read the message 100 times, but I should see it in person." They traveled together on a small diplomatic ship. The journey took 3 weeks now that the transition gates were dead. Keth spent the time reading everything Kira had collected about humans. Stories, photos, videos, personal accounts. He absorbed it all like a student preparing for the most important exam of his life. New. Seoul looked different than it had 10 years ago. The buildings were still gone, dismantled by human thoroughness. But nature had reclaimed the empty spaces. Earth plants grew wild everywhere, mixing with native vegetation to create landscapes that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. They walked through the old city center together. Kira showed Keth the park where Taemin used to walk. The fountain had stopped working years ago, but someone had placed flowers around it. Fresh flowers. People came here regularly to remember. The cavern entrance was marked now. Kira had requested that it be left open for visitors, and the council had agreed. They descended the old access tunnel in silence, their lights casting strange shadows on the walls. Hyeonwoo's message was exactly as Kira remembered. She had seen it 16 times before, but it still made her chest ache. Keth read it slowly, running his fingers over the carved letters the way Kira had taught him. When he finished, he sat down on the cavern floor and cried. Kira led him. She understood. Sometimes you needed to cry for what was lost before you could work for what remained. After a while, Keth wiped his eyes and stood up. "We should add our own message," he said. "Not to replace theirs, but to show them we learned." Spent 2 days carving a new message on the opposite wall. It was in Korean because that felt right. Kira wrote the words and Keth helped with the carving. When they finished, it read, "We heard you. We were late, but we heard you. You tried to teach us, and we refused to learn until you were gone. That shame belongs to our generation, not yours. We are trying now to build what you showed us was possible. A galaxy based on respect, partnership, and mutual dignity. Not because we hope you will return, but because it is right. Thank you for everything you gave us. Thank you for your patience with our failures. Thank you for believing we could be better, even when we proved you wrong. We are sorry. We will do better. If any human ever reads this, know that you mattered more than you could ever know. Kira signed it with both their names and the date. Then they sat in the cavern for a long time, neither speaking. Finally, Kira said, "Do you think it is enough?" Keth shook his head. "No, but it is honest. That is all we can offer." They returned to Council Space and continued their work. The problems did not get easier. The Vratics continued expanding. Plagues continued appearing. Stations continued failing. Species continued withdrawing from the Council or going extinct in conflicts. No one could stop. But slowly, very slowly, some things began to improve. The younger generation took the Tom Accords seriously in ways their parents never had. They studied human methods of conflict resolution, human approaches to medical research, human philosophies of engineering and design. They could not replicate human genius, but they could earn from human wisdom. Small successes appeared. A plague was contained before it spread beyond one planet. A defensive alliance held against Radix probes. A damaged station was successfully repaired using principles from Su Young's training materials. None of it was as good as when humans did it. But it was better than before. Kira established universities dedicated to studying humanity. Not just their technology, but their culture, their ethics, their way of thinking. Students came from across the galaxy to learn about the species that had left. Some did it out of genuine interest. Others did it because they hoped to find humans and convince them to return. Neither group succeeded in their ultimate goal. Oh, they learned. And learning was its own reward, far beyond the galactic rim. On a world whose location was erased from every database that ever existed, a woman named Dayun worked in a garden. She was Taemin's daughter, born 2 years after the departure. She had never seen an alien face except in historical recordings. She tended Earth vegetables that grew under a sun that was not Earth's. Around her, a small city of humans went about their lives. They were happy here, or as happy as people could be when they had chosen exile over acceptance. Dayun's work tablet chimed. A long-range sensor had detected something. She opened the file and saw the transmission from New Sol. The sensors that humans had left behind still watched the galaxy, not to interfere, but to observe. To see if the galaxy they had left behind would learn and grow, or collapse and die. She read the message that Kira and Keth had carved. She looked at the images of the flowers around Taemin's fountain. She studied the reports about the younger generation and their efforts to understand humanity. Then she did something that surprised her. She cried. Not from sadness, but from something else. Hope, maybe, or recognition. These aliens were trying, really trying, not just pretending. Her father had told her once, when she was very young, trust is earned slowly and lost quickly. It takes generations to build and moments to destroy. We left because our trust was destroyed. Perhaps someday, if they prove themselves over generations, our descendants might trust again. But that will be their choice, not ours. Dayun thought about that for a long time. Then she closed the transmission and returned to her garden. The galaxy would have to prove itself. Not for her generation, but perhaps for her children's children. Trust, once broken completely, could only be rebuilt slowly, carefully, over generations. The galaxy would wait, and humanity would watch. And time would tell if the lessons learned had been learned well enough to matter, in the cavern on New Sol. Kira's message remained carved in stone. Humans might read it someday, or they might not. But it stood as proof that some beings had learned, had changed, had tried to be worthy of the partnership they had lost. Whether that would ever be enough, only time would tell.